It's 6:17 in the evening. In Cincinnati, my mother just walked through her front door. She is standing in her kitchen. I know this because I have seen that kitchen 10,000 times. Mustard-colored cabinets. A calendar from 2019 still hanging by the fridge. A ceramic rooster she won at a church raffle in 1994. She is holding a white paper bag from CVS. She just picked up her insulin. I called her 10 minutes ago. I told her I had something to show her. She doesn't know I'm recording. Hey, Mom, I need you to look at something. I'm going to hold a piece of paper up to my camera. I need you to read the bottom line. Can you see that? Mom, that is a pharmacy receipt from Norway. It's for insulin. 2 boxes of pens. Same kind you use. Look at the number at the bottom. 277 kroner. That's about $25. Mom? 277 kroner, $25, for 2 boxes. That's the video. That's the whole video. My mother stared at a $25 receipt for 30 seconds and couldn't speak. But before you understand what just happened to her, you need to understand what happened to her this morning at the CVS in Cincinnati. Because the $25 isn't the story. The $300 is. Let's talk about insulin, and let's start with the fact that I was wrong about everything. My mother was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 12 years ago. She was 59. She had gone in for a routine checkup because her vision was getting blurry. She thought she needed new glasses. The doctor ran a blood test. Her A1C was 8.2. He said, "Linda, you have diabetes." She said, "Are you sure?" He said, "I'm sure." She didn't cry. She went home and made a list. That's what my mother does. She makes lists. She made a list of foods she couldn't eat anymore. She made a list of walks she would take. She made a list of her mother's recipes she would have to modify. My grandmother had diabetes too. She lost a toe. Then she lost a foot. Then she died at 71. My mother watched it happen. So when the doctor said diabetes, my mother didn't panic. She made a list. For the first 5 years, she managed it with pills and diet. She cut out bread. She walked around the block every morning at 6, even in January, even when it was 12 degrees. She was good at it. She is good at everything she commits to. She committed to her marriage for 32 years until my father died. She committed to her job at the bank for 30 years until they offered her a retirement package she couldn't refuse. She committed to raising 3 kids on a salary that never quite covered 3 kids. And she committed to beating diabetes without insulin. 7 years ago, her doctor said the pills weren't enough. Her A1C had crept back up to 8.5. He said, "Linda, you need insulin." She said, "I don't want needles." He said, "They're pens, not needles. You click a button." She said, "How much?" He said, "Your insurance will cover most of it." She said, "Most?" He said, "Most." She called me that night. It was 3 a.m. in Norway. I was asleep. My phone rang. I answered. She said, "Matt, how much does insulin cost?" I said, "I don't know, Mom. I think it's expensive." She said, "How expensive?" I said, "I'll look it up." I looked it up. I called her back. I said, "It depends on your insurance." She said, "I have Medicare." I said, "Then it should be okay." I was wrong. Last month, she called me from the CVS parking lot. It was 10 a.m. She had just picked up her prescription. 2 boxes of insulin pens. Novo Rapid. The same thing she gets every month. The pharmacist rang it up. $287. She stood at the counter and asked him to check it twice. He checked. It was $287. She is on Medicare. In 2023, they passed a law saying insulin for Medicare patients should be $35 a month. President Biden stood in the Rose Garden and said no senior should pay more than $35 for insulin. The news ran it for 3 days. My mother saw it on CNN. She called me. She said, "Matt, did you hear? $35. I said, "That's great, Mom." She said, "I knew they'd fix it. But here's the thing they don't tell you on the news. That $35 cap only applies if your specific insulin is on your plan's formulary. Your plan's formulary is a list of drugs your insurance company decided they will cover. If your doctor prescribed an insulin that your plan decided not to put on that list, the cap doesn't apply. You pay the pharmacy price, the list price, the price that was supposed to be capped but isn't, because your insurance company and your doctor never talk to each other. My mother's doctor prescribed Novo Rapid. Her Medicare plan doesn't cover it. It's not on their formulary. They cover Humalog. They cover Novolog, but not Novo Rapid. Her doctor says Novo Rapid works better for her blood sugar. Her insurance says they don't care. So every month, she pays $287 every month for the rest of her life. She told me she stood in the CVS parking lot for 10 minutes. She told me she did the math on whether she could skip a dose and make the pens last longer. She told me she opened her wallet, counted her cash, and considered driving home without the medicine. She didn't. She bought it, but she thought about it. She told me she sat in her car and cried for 5 minutes before she could drive. She didn't tell my brother. She didn't tell my sister. She told me because I was the one who moved to Norway, and she thought maybe I would understand something the rest of the family wouldn't. That is the American scar I am carrying when I hold up a Norwegian receipt that says 277 kroner. That is the weight on my chest when I watch my mother stare at a screen and go quiet. That is the reason I am recording this call. I called my brother before I called her back. I told him about the parking lot. I told him about the $287. I told him I was going to show Mom a receipt from Norway. He said, "Matt, record it. I want to hear what she says. I want to hear what a person sounds like when they learn that another country decided their mother was worth $25. Item 1. How I got this receipt. I didn't buy insulin. I can't. In Norway, insulin requires a prescription. I'm not diabetic. My partner's mother is. She is 71. She is a retired nurse. She worked at Ullevål Hospital for 38 years. She has had type 2 diabetes for 15 years. She takes the same kind of insulin as my mother, Novo Rapid, Insulin Aspart, 2 boxes a month, same manufacturer, same dosage, same pens. The only difference is the country printed on the box. Last Tuesday, she came back from the pharmacy. Epitech 1, 2 blocks from her apartment. She handed me the receipt. She said, "You wanted to see it. Here. Look at this." The total cost of the medicine to the system is 462 kroner. About $42. That's what the pharmacy paid the manufacturer. But look at the patient charge. The Egenandel, 277 kroner, $25. That's what she paid. Out of pocket. At the counter, I asked her if this was a one-time price. A first-month discount, a subsidy for seniors, a veteran's benefit, a seasonal sale. I was looking for the catch. I am always looking for the catch. She laughed. She said, "Matt, I get this every month. Sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes a bit less. It depends on where I am in the year. Once I hit the annual cap, it's free. Completely free. The receipt says free court. Free card. I don't pay anything after that. Not for insulin. Not for blood pressure pills. Not for anything on the blue prescription." I asked her what the annual cap is. She said, 3,278 kroner. About $300. After that, everything is free. The receipt says free court. Free card. I sat down. I sat down because I realized that in America, my mother pays $287 every month. Forever. No cap. No free card. No end. In Norway, my partner's mother pays $25. And if she ever pays more than $328 in a year, the rest is free. Not just insulin. Everything. I asked her how this works. I asked her who negotiates the price. She said the Norwegian government negotiates with the manufacturer every year. They say, "We have 5 million people who need this drug. We will buy it for all of them. What is your price?" The manufacturer gives a number. The government says yes or no. If no, the drug doesn't get reimbursed. If yes, every pharmacy in Norway sells it for the same patient charge. No variation. No competition. No coupons. No good RX. No haggling. Just a number. I asked her if the pharmacies make money. She said yes, but not on the drug. They make a dispensing fee. A flat rate. They don't mark up the insulin. They don't compete on price. They compete on service, on opening hours, on whether the pharmacist remembers your name. I asked her if she ever worries about the price changing. She said no. The price is set in the national budget. It changes once a year, in January. Sometimes it goes down. Sometimes it goes up by a few kroner, but it never doubles. It never surprises you at the counter. You know what you will pay before you walk in. That is not a pricing difference. That is a decision difference. I said, Mom, look at your receipt. Look at the Norwegian one. $25 for the same drug. From the same company. Same box. Same pens. She looked at her CVS receipt. $287. She looked at the Norwegian printout. $25. She looked back at her CVS receipt. She looked back at the Norwegian printout. She didn't speak. I said, Mom, are you there? She said, is this with insurance? I said, this is the insurance. The Norwegian government negotiates the price with the manufacturer. They buy it for everyone, so they pay less. And because they buy it for everyone, the patient pays almost nothing. It's not welfare, Mum. It's scale. It's the difference between buying 1 pen and buying 5 million pens. The price per pen drops, and the government passes that drop to the patient, because the patient is the point. The patient is not the customer. The patient is the citizen. She said, so everyone gets it for $25? I said, everyone with a prescription. Everyone with diabetes. The price doesn't change if you're rich or poor. The price doesn't change if your boss picks a different insurance plan. The price doesn't change if you live in Oslo or if you live in a village with 200 people. The price is the price because it's not a product on a shelf. It's infrastructure. Like a road, like clean water, like a fire department. You don't charge different people different prices for the fire department. You don't make the fire department a subscription service. You fund it, you maintain it, and you send the truck when the house is burning. In Norway, diabetes is a burning house, and the insulin is the truck. And the truck costs $25. She said, Matt, I paid $287 this morning. I stood in the parking lot and thought about skipping doses, and someone in Norway just walked out of a pharmacy with the same box for $25. I said, yes. She said, read that number again. Slowly. I said, 277 kroner. $25. She went quiet. She looked away from the camera. She looked at her mustard-colored cabinets. She looked back at the screen. She stared. I said, Mom, say something. She said, I don't know what to say. I've been paying $287 for 7 years. That's $24,000. I've paid $24,000 for insulin. And you're telling me that in Norway, I would have paid about $2,000 for the same amount. The difference is $22,000. That's my car. That's the car I drive to CVS. I could have bought a new car with the difference. She went quiet again. I called my brother that night. I told him what Mom said. I told him about the staring. I told him she printed the receipt and taped it to her fridge. I told him she had already called her doctor's office to ask if she could switch to a formulary insulin. They told her the formulary one doesn't work as well for her blood sugar. They told her to talk to her insurance. She called the insurance. They put her on hold for 40 minutes. Then they hung up. My brother said, check the math. Are you sure it's the same drug? I said, Novorapid. Insulin Aspart. Same manufacturer, same dosage, same pens. I checked the label myself. I checked the NDC number. I checked the strength. It's the same molecule in the same cartridge with the same needle. The only difference is the country that bought it. He said, okay, $287 a month. That's $3,444 a year. The Norwegian receipt is $25 a month. That's $300 a year. The difference is $3,144 annually. Over 10 years, that's $31,440. Over the 7 years she's been on insulin, that's $22,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a down payment on a house in Cincinnati. That's 2 years of her Social Security. That's not dying because you can't afford a pen. I said, I know. He said, and the Norwegian annual cap? The free court. I said, 3,278 kroner. About $300. After that, everything is free. He said, so if Mom lived in Norway, her maximum annual cost for all prescriptions would be about $300. In America, she pays $3,444 for insulin alone. That's more than 11 times the Norwegian cap. For one drug, and if she needs other prescriptions, She pays extra. In Norway, the cap covers everything, so the real multiplier is higher. It's not 11 times, it's 15, maybe 20, depending on what else she takes. I said, I checked the math. You're right. He went quiet. Then he said, Matt. In Norway, they decided that keeping diabetics alive is cheaper than letting them get sick. In America, they decided that keeping diabetics alive is a revenue stream. That's not math. That's a decision. And Mom is on the wrong side of it. And the worst part is, she did everything right. She has insurance. She has Medicare. She worked her whole life. She paid into the system, and the system is still charging her $287 because a company and an insurance plan couldn't agree on which number to put on a list. That's not a market failure. That's a market working exactly as designed. I didn't know what to say. I just held the phone and looked at the two receipts on my desk. One said $287. The other said 277 kroner. The difference between them was not the drug. It was not the manufacturer. It was not the dosage. It was the country. It was the decision. It was the question of whether a diabetic is a customer to be charged or a citizen to be kept alive. I showed her the video of Mom staring at the screen. I showed her the two receipts. I told her about the CVS parking lot. I told her my mother thought about skipping doses. I told her my mother sat in her car and cried. She didn't say anything at first. She just stirred her coffee. Then she said, in Norway, we don't think of insulin as a product. We think of it as infrastructure, like roads or water or the fire department. You don't charge someone 12 times more for water because they have diabetes. You don't make a profit on their survival. You make sure they take their medicine so they don't end up in the hospital. Because a hospital costs more than insulin. An amputation costs more than insulin. A funeral costs more than insulin. The math is simple. The morality is simpler. I said I thought it was welfare. I thought the government was giving it away. I thought it was charity. I thought Norwegians were naive. I thought that if you let the government set prices, the companies would stop making drugs. I thought the free market was the only way to get innovation. She said, it's not charity. It's purchasing power. The government negotiates for 10 million people, so the manufacturer charges less, and the patient pays almost nothing. The pharmacy doesn't set the price. The insurance company doesn't set the price. The government sets the price. And the price is, you should not go bankrupt because your pancreas stopped working. And as for innovation, Novo Nordisk is a Danish company. They make plenty of money selling insulin to Norway. They make plenty of money selling insulin to Denmark. They make plenty of money selling insulin to Sweden. They just don't make all of it from one diabetic in Cincinnati. They spread it across 10 million people who each pay a little. That's not anti-market. That's a different market. A market where the buyer has power. Where the buyer is the government. Where the buyer says, we will buy your drug, but we will not let you charge whatever you want for a molecule that keeps people alive. I said, but what about the companies? Don't they make less money? She looked at me. She said, they make enough. They sell to 10 million people in Scandinavia alone. They sell to the NHS in Britain. They sell to Germany. They sell to France. They sell to countries that all negotiate. The only country that doesn't negotiate is the one your mother lives in. The only country that lets the company charge whatever they want is America. So don't ask me if the companies make less money. Ask me why America is the only country that decided not to ask. I admitted something then. I admitted that I thought Norwegians were naive. I thought that government price setting was interference. I thought that if a company invented a drug, they should charge whatever the market would bear. I thought that was freedom. I thought that was capitalism. I thought that was the American way. She said, and what would your mother bear? $287? 500? 1,000? Where does the market end, Matt? When she's dead? When she stops buying because she can't afford it? Is that the market correcting itself? A diabetic dying because the price was too high? Is that the invisible hand? Because it looks like a fist to me. I went quiet. Because she was right. I had been calling greed the market. I had been calling price gouging innovation. I had been calling a system that makes my mother ration her medicine freedom. And I was wrong. I had been wrong for 35 years. I had been wrong since the first time I paid a copay and thought that was just how healthcare worked. I had been wrong since I believed that expensive medicine meant better medicine. I had been wrong since I thought that the problem was my mother's insurance plan and not the system that created the plan in the first place. She said, "The catch is..." I said, "The catch is you have to live in Norway to get it." She smiled. Not a victory smile. A knowing smile. She said, "Yes, that is the catch. But it should not be. Insulin is insulin. A diabetic is a diabetic. The only difference is the decision. Norway decided that the diabetic matters more than the profit. America decided that the profit matters more than the diabetic. That is not a medical difference. That is a moral difference. And your mother is paying the price for America's morality. I called Mom back the next morning. She had slept on it. She said she didn't sleep well. She said she kept waking up and looking at the receipt on her fridge. She said she got up at 3 in the morning and made a cup of tea and just stood there in the dark kitchen looking at it. She said, "I took the receipt to my doctor. I showed him the Norwegian one. I showed him my CVS one. I asked him why my country can't do this. I said, what did he say? He said he knows. He said he fights with insurance companies every day. He said he writes prescriptions and then gets letters saying the insurance won't cover them. He said he's tired. He said he's been tired for 20 years. He said he went to medical school to help people, and now he spends half his day on hold with insurance companies arguing about whether a drug is medically necessary. He said the system is broken. He said he doesn't know how to fix it. He said he's sorry." I said, "I'm sorry, Mom." She said, "Don't be sorry. Be angry." I'm angry. I worked for 40 years. I paid into Medicare my whole life. I paid taxes. I voted. I did everything they told me to do. And now I stand in a parking lot and think about skipping medicine because a company and an insurance plan can't agree on which number to put on a list. That's not a system. That's a hostage situation. And the hostage is me. And the ransom is $287 a month. Forever. My brother texted me that afternoon. He had run the numbers for Cincinnati. He had called 3 pharmacies. He had checked GoodRx. He had checked Medicare's website. He had checked the manufacturer's patient assistance program. He said if Mom lived in Norway, she would have saved $28,000 over the past 10 years. That's not a theory. That's compound interest in reverse. That's the tax America charges you for being diabetic. And it's not a tax that funds anything. It doesn't fund roads. It doesn't fund schools. It funds a CEO's bonus. It funds a stock buyback. It funds a yacht. And your mother funds it with her parking lot tears. I looked at the receipt on Mom's fridge, next to the 2019 calendar, next to the mustard cabinets, next to the ceramic rooster, a $25 receipt from a country that decided she was worth keeping alive, a country that decided her pancreas was not a profit center, a country that decided a nurse's retirement should not be spent on a drug that costs less to make than a sandwich. I said, "Mom, I'm angry too." She said, "Good. Now make the video." I came to Norway thinking I understood healthcare. I understood copays and deductibles and formularies. I understood premiums and networks and prior authorizations. I understood the language of American medicine. I spoke it fluently. I could translate it for foreigners. I could explain why an MRI costs $3,000 and why an ambulance ride costs $1,200 and why a Band-Aid in an emergency room costs $47. I understood it. I accepted it. I thought it was the only way. What I didn't understand was that in Norway, the language is different. They don't say out of network. They don't say non-formulary. They don't say prior authorization. They don't say your plan doesn't cover that. They don't say, have you tried the generic? They don't say, we'll need to submit for approval. They say prescription, and then they hand you a box of insulin for $25, and then they ask if you want a bag, and then they say, have a nice day. And that's the whole transaction. No tears, no parking lot math, no skipped doses, no 40-minute hold. Just a prescription, a receipt, and a human being who gets to keep living. But here's the thing. I still don't understand everything. Next week, I'm taking my mother inside a Norwegian hospital, not as a patient, as a witness. She's going to see a billing desk that isn't there. She's going to see a hospital bill that fits on one line. She's going to see a nurse who doesn't ask for her insurance card. She's going to see a doctor who spends 40 minutes with her instead of 7. And she's going to ask a question that breaks every American's brain. Where do I pay? Tuesday. My American mom saw Norway's yearly healthcare cap. She checked her Medicare statement. She'll have her Medicare card in one hand and a Norwegian free card in the other. She'll have her reading glasses on. She'll have that look she gets when she's about to find a mistake in the math. And I have a feeling she's going to check the numbers 3 times. If you're Norwegian, tell me in the comments. Did you know your insulin costs about $25 because your government decided to negotiate? Did you ever realize how unusual that is? Did you ever think about the American mother standing in a parking lot, holding a bag of medicine she can't afford, wondering if she can skip a dose? If you're American, tell me, what's your last pharmacy bill? And did you stand in the parking lot and think about skipping it? And did you tell anyone? Or did you just drive home and cry and pay the $287 and hope next month would be different? I'll be in the comments for the next 2 hours. I owe you that. And I owe you more videos. And I owe my mother a country that doesn't make her choose between her medicine and her dignity. See you Tuesday.